our chicken pie. So what we're going to do is put on our oven, just because I don't want to forget. We're going to preheat our oven to 180 degrees. And the other little things that you need to do is, sometimes in advance, I'll put them in the chat, is to just fill a kettle as well, because we're going to need some chicken stock. So while you go to put on your oven at 180, so make sure that there's nothing, make sure that last night's dinner isn't in the oven, and you can do that. And then the other thing we're going to do is put on our kettle. So just go over, fill your kettle, at the same time wash your hands. Okay, so the kettle water is just to make our chicken stock. So I want to make sure that we have everything. So we're going to go and, first of all, we're going to chop our veg, and we're not going to chop the chicken until it's the last thing we're chopping, because we don't want to cross-contaminate. So once we touch the chicken, we really don't want to be touching anything else. So again, this is why it's constantly wash as you go, fill your sink with sudsy water. Okay, let's lay out our ingredients. So we have some olive oil for frying. We have an onion that we're going to fry off with our leek. So we're going to be doing our veg here. We're going to have a little bit of thyme herbs. So I got this from the garden, but you could use dried herbs as well. And your options here are, I would say tonight, don't be messing too much unless you know how much that you want to use. So a little pinch of tarragon, thyme, or tarragon is lovely, or sage. Sage would be a lot stronger, but just have a look in your cupboard and just see what the dates are like. If they're not like 5 years old, it might be okay. Just add a little pinch of that, and then you can start to develop your palate and see how adding a little bit of this, a little bit of that, especially with herbs, it's not like chili where it's going to overtake everything. So that'll be fine. We're going to weigh out our butter, and we have an egg there as well. The egg goes with the pastry brush and the pastry. So I have my pastry in the fridge. I want to say to you that you've been defrosting your pastry, but if it's been left out for a few hours now, it's probably getting a little bit warm in the kitchen. So I would keep it in, once it's defrosted, keep it in the fridge, because it's much easier to roll out and work with, and it won't start to kind of get a little bit too malleable and warm when it's in the kitchen. So pastry's in the fridge, the chicken's in the fridge. I haven't chopped the chicken, but I have the egg for the pastry there as well. The next thing, so we're ready and when we have everything chopped, it's an easy thing to do, so let's do it now. We want to weigh out about 30 grams of butter. So this is where I start paying attention to the little tips I'm going to give you. So do you have the scales out? Do you need the scales today? You don't really, okay? So you could either have your scales if you have it and weigh out your 30 grams of butter. But 30 grams of butter, different cookbooks in the States and UK States, some people say an ounce is 30 grams, some people say an ounce is 25 grams. So that's totally to confuse you guys, okay? And anyway, you're in your metric, anyway, in your grams. But I was brought up and it's always like an ounce of this and whatever. So the best thing to do is look at your butter packet, and actually most of them will have the grams written on the butter packet, okay? So there's little lines here, and I've got 25 grams, 25 grams, 25 grams. So 25 grams, 30 grams is coming from an ounce of butter. So it's like a big knob of butter for frying our onions and our leeks, okay? So what I want you to do is, if you don't have the scales, don't worry about it. Don't start running around to weigh out 30 grams of butter. It doesn't really matter. What I want you to do is look at the package. You might be able to guesstimate just one of those wedges of 25 grams. What does 25 grams look like? If you had not a supersized brownie, but if you had a piece of brownie or flapjack, it's probably like thinner, like half the thinness, if you like. So this like a square of brownie, but actually cut in half. So just a little wedge of butter, and you'll have that to hand then, because you've just kind of, I'm not weighing it, I just know it's kind of looks a bit like that, and that's just a little kind of two matchboxes of butter. Okay, so this is how we're going to think about our ingredients. It's not, you're all busy, it's a long day for you, and you just need to come in, enjoy the cooking, and when we're baking, we'll be measuring things out as accurately as we can, okay? And the other thing I want to do is, we have our kettle boiled. So again, just so that we have everything to hand, I don't want you all getting stressed about chopping onions. So what we're going to do is just grab a jug and get our stock made. Now again, just like the butter, I have a little thing in my head that I want you to start thinking about, is a stock cube, or these little bouillon things of chicken stock are great. Or else you might have one of these little stock cubes, okay? Either is fine, but when you buy them, they're always sold in these sizes, and they are made to make up a pint of stock, okay? That's just a rule of thumb. That's just want you to put that in your head. So when you see my recipe today, we're not making soup where, you know, we can add a little bit more, a little bit less, or double the stock, you know, to make the soup thinner. We're actually kind of only want 300 grams of stock. So sometimes I would actually only put, that's 300 grams is not quite the pint, because the pint is about 500 mils, 450 to 500 mils, again, to confuse you. So we know that we know a pint is 500 mils, we say, but technically it's about 450. So the 300 grams means that you don't need as much stock, because if you put in all of the stock, and it's fine if you do, but it's just going to be a lot more salty, okay? And then if it's more salty, when I say add in your salt and season and stuff, you just have to remember, well, you already had a lot of seasoning in salt in your stock, so you may not need as much. So I put my stock bouillon in there, or you might have a little stock cube. A handy thing to do is you can just kind of rub that stock cube between your fingers to crumble it in. It'll make it a lot easier. Sometimes it takes ages to dissolve these stock cubes. I'm just going to put 300 mils into my jug. Again, if you don't have a jug which says 300 mils, I want you to think of a big, decent sized mug. So not a teacup, your normal mug for the tea, okay, and maybe the bigger mug than that, if you like. So the mug for the tea is probably about 250 to 300 mils. So it's actually just a good size mug of stock, and that will do. So again, we don't need to be rummaging around to get everything weighed out properly. Now, some of you are big bakers, or you have sisters or brothers who already have done the course, and maybe they you know, got presents at Christmas last year, so they might actually have all these things, and that's great. If you have your little digital scales, you can switch between mils and grams and all those things. But a lot of you, this is the first time, or else the stuff is there but you just don't know where it is. Okay, so that's 300 mils of stock. So again, we're just getting ahead a few little things. We've got our butter and we've got our stock. Is there anything in the chat that I need to know about? I'm not seeing anything flash up. So definitely, please, if you can unmute, I'd love that, because it's just a lot easier for me, and then I can answer it as we go. If at any stage we have something that, like a task, I want you to all just take your time. We might take the onion, and I say we'll take some music. It just means I will go and I'll play a song, and you know that until the song is finished, you have that time to just do your little do your prep and take your time and concentrate on it. Okay, we also, like the butter, like the stock, we could get ahead, but actually I don't really need to. I have flour. I know that when you have your medicine, we know that a teaspoon is 5 grams of something, okay, when you have your medicine, or like a teaspoon of sugar would be 5 grams of sugar. Now, all of these are just rules of thumb, but this, I want you to start thinking like this. And so when I look at my recipe and I see how much flour we have, and the flour is just simply plain flour to thicken our pie. And I just have to grab the recipe. So I think it's about 30 grams. Well, I know that a teaspoon is 5 grams and a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So suddenly I'm up to 15 grams. So if my recipe says 30 grams of plain flour, well, I know a tablespoon is 15 grams. So I kind of just go, well, I'm just going to do 2 tablespoons of flour. Okay, making sense, hopefully. Again, I don't want you stressing out and weighing things as well. You've got extra bowls that will need to be washed up and stuff, and then, you know, it's just more hassle. Okay, so I have my flour there. We just kind of keep it beside us. So the next thing we're going to do is look at our veg, okay? And after we've done the leek and the onion, then we will move on to the chicken. The reason is, with chicken, we all know that chicken's one of these high contamination foods. So when you touch the chicken, the packet, anything else, so if you have a helper in the kitchen, get them to put it on a dinner plate. The dinner plate will go straight into the dishwasher. So just when you chop the chicken straight onto the dinner plate, the packet goes into your sudsy water, and then it's dealt with, okay? And no one's going to be kind of like eating a bit of brownie next week with the chicken dripping, or chicken packet on top of the shelf dripping down, all that kind of stuff. We know it happens. Okay, so now we have our onion and our leek. Okay, I don't want you to prep the leek yet, because I've got some really good tips about the leek. So I'm going to start with the leek, actually, before we do the onion. So the leek is really, really simple. You can see this leek. We have, they're not growing in the garden at the moment, but this one I just had, and I kind of kept it from last week. It's got really yucky leaves on the outside, so they're coming straight off, okay? But I want you to not throw away any of the dark green leaves, okay? Some of your leeks might be really long, and actually there might be some kind of dark leeks. And you might see chefs on TV saying, oh, I only use the white bit of my leek and everything, it's all French cooking. But I would use the green leek in my cooking. I'd use it in my chicken pie, you know, the darker top leaf. But I'd also, if I if I had such a huge leek and I didn't need it, I would use that in a soup. I could make a leek and potato soup. And you could also just chop it up, clean it like the rest of the leek, and then pop it in your freezer. And then the next time you're making soup, you can throw that in with the soup. Anything dark, leafy, green veg is good for you. Now, how do we deal with the leek? The leek is growing out of the ground. There's the root on the base. Okay, as it comes up through the soil, it might be very clay soil like ours here in the garden. So it's going to pick up a lot of grit or sand or little stones and stuff. So the worst thing you can do is make your lovely chicken and leek pie tonight and not actually clean your leek. And then someone gets a little bit of sand. So it's so easy. Once you know how, you just chop off the kind of root end of your leek. And then you just slice. I can already see a little bit of sand here. I'm going to slice down the length of the leek. Now, if you look at the camera here, I have the pinned cameras myself. We are going down the length of the camera. Take your time, the leek. Take your time, and you just slice down your leek, and then I'm going to show you how to open it out like a book. Now, you can slice the whole way through, so it opens out, or you can just, well, sometimes I don't slice the whole way through. And then what you do, look at the camera, I'm just going to open it up like a book, and you can see all of those bits of, well, if there is sand, you'll see it in there. It's a little bit gritty, and this is what you're looking for. So the way you just rinse your leek is you go over to the tap, you hold it under the cold tap, and you just rub, as you're opening it up like a book, you'll find that all the grit and sand is mainly in the outer leaves anyway and towards the top. But you open it and you just start rubbing your thumb through those kind of book pages of the leek, and it'll just kind of fall off, and then it's done. Okay, and it doesn't matter that our leek is a little bit wet when you've done that. That's fine, that's normal. Okay, so I'm just going to rinse my leek now under the cold running tap, rubbing with your thumb to get rid of any grit. Give it a shake over the hob, okay? And then just check that you didn't get any of the grit on our works. I'm just going to use my cloth because I can see a little bit of sand went on my chopping board. Okay, so we've got our leek ready. I'll give you a minute to do that. Now we're going to start just chopping our leek. So the good thing to do here, again, I mentioned the dinner plate. So grab a dinner plate. So when you chop something on the course, I would suggest you just have one of the dinner plates. You usually have like more than you need for the dinner. Just grab a dinner plate so that when you chop something, it just goes on the dinner plate, and you know, it's something that stacks in the fridge. You don't need a big bowl or anything like that for it. When you're chopping things, here's another good tip, top tip again, is always, some of you won't be very good with your knives, you won't know your knives may not be sharp. That's totally and utterly normal, okay? We all have busy lives, and sometimes mine are embarrassingly blunt as well. So the safest thing to do is get a little bit of kitchen roll and wet it and place it under your chopping board. So I'm going to do that now. A little bit of kitchen roll or a very thin J-cloth. Just it goes underneath your chopping board, because that is one of the best tips I'll tell you, is that little bit of wet cloth is going to stabilize your board and stop your board moving around. And especially if you're dealing with things like onions and stuff, it really does make a difference. Any questions? Give me a thumbs up if you've got your leek ready, and we're going to go into chopping our onion next. And this is a good time for chats. Okay, thank you, Alana. While we're doing that, I'll just make sure there's no messages coming in, in case anyone's having difficulty. Give me a thumbs up, guys. I'll wait till I have a few more thumbs up. And we're going to go into chopping our onion next. Okay, so everyone seems fine, there's no panics. Okay. Someone's there panicking on something. Is Charlotte here? Can you let me know? You should have that email. Okay, so now what we're going to do is do our onions. So I just want to get the dinner plate and chop the leek first. And get that just set aside while we have it out. So this is a very large leek, so again, you won't need all of it, but having said that, my kids will eat the leek now, so I'm just going to chop it all. And what I want to do is just cut it into like postage sizes, postage stamp sizes. So I might as well just chop all of this. And again, if you don't think you need it all, or I mean, most of you will just buy the leeks in the shop. So when we're chopping, I want you to get used to this motion. So we're using our nice cook's knife like this, okay? We're keeping the nose of the knife, which I mean the tip of the knife, down on the board. Keeping your fingers away from the knife. So if your fingers are ever in the line of the knife, you're doing something wrong. So just you're trying to get postage size stamps, or just slice across the onion, just because mine is very big. Okay, and then when you have leeks, you have a few leeks here, you can just pop them on your plate in front of you. Okay, so take your time, and then I'm going to use a similar technique when we do our onion, and you could either watch the onion and then try it yourself. I'll play a music tune, and that'll give you a bit of a chance just to do that. So if you watch again, my onion is quite big, so I just want it to be a little bit smaller. The leek just disintegrates down, really. It doesn't disintegrate, but it actually just kind of reduces down in the pot. So it looks like a lot, but it probably isn't going to be too much. Having said that, this is quite a big one. Again, my leeks are kind of splaying out here. So again, as long as if you're holding the leek strongly and your fingers are away from the knife will not come down. The other safety thing is, because you've got the tip of the knife on the board, it's never really coming and slipping from a high angle. As long as your fingers are well away from the knife, they should never, always check and just freeze at any point. Check where your thumb is, your little finger is. The thumb is usually the thing that's kind of sitting there waiting to be chopped off. Okay. Okay, so, and you don't want to get a nasty cut. We'll get the dog in now. Okay, so there's my leeks on the plate, and now we're going to do a demonstration of chopping an onion. And what you can do is, after I've done mine, so you might as well just, even if you want to just watch it, and then I can even do a second one if people want me to do it again, or I'll play a tune and then you can just take your time doing it yourselves. Okay, so let's just go into that now. And as you can see, we're fine for time, because all we're going to be doing is chopping our onion. Then we'll be taking out our frying pan, putting the oil in with the leeks and the onion. And actually, before we do that, we'll chop our chicken, and then we'll get rid of our chopping board, okay? So there's Monty. Okay, so let's have a look at how we want to chop an onion safely. And none of you are going to have the speed. I'd be very impressed if you did at this stage in your lives, but there's Monty. So you have got an onion here, and just think about it, and it's something that if you learn your own technique, there's a different technique in the online course, so the way I show you tonight, it may not suit you, but it suits me, and it's how I kind of just practice, and I'll build up my speed over all the years I've been cooking. But the online course would be great, because you can just do it on demand, watch the carrot soup tutorial, carrot soup video, and then you'll see a lot of knife skills, and it'll be a great way to take your time and just keep practicing a technique, and then if you stick with the same technique, it will make a difference. So let me just get that. Okay, so what we have is we have our onion. So I want you to think about this. So we have the onion again, like the leek, growing out of the ground, and we have the fibrous root end here. Okay, and this is the bit that's going to hold the onion together when you are chopping it. Okay, so when you chop your onion, I'm not going to just say take off, chop off the end and both ends, the top and the bottom, because it's really important that you can chop the top off, the kind of papery, stalky bit of the onion, not the base. Chop that anywhere you want to. But when you chop the root end, I want you to just look at it and just go very thinly and just literally shave the root, kind of those fibers away, but try and still see that kind of hard root part holding it together. So again, just shaving it, just going down slowly with my knife and shaving it, and then you can naturally, your skin of the onion will just start to kind of come away. And what we can do now is peel the onion skin away, or if you want to, you can just sit your onion down on the board like I'm doing now with the root pointing up towards me, and I'm just going to chop through the root, and I think that's a good way to do it. It just means, again, my hand is going over the knife, so nothing's going to slip. The nose of the knife is on the board here. I'm looking at the root and I'm going through the root, because that is going to make sure that when I chop my onion, I've got two halves and both of them have a bit of the root there in front of me. Okay, so now I'm going to just peel my onion and I'm going to show you how to chop it, and if you want I can do it again, and I'll definitely give you a chance to do it yourselves while I just play the music. So let me just do it kind of quickly this time. So we've done that. So when I have both halves of the onion, I have my knife in the side, that was the top end, the shoot end, and the root end is in my free hand, okay, or it's not in it, but it's kind of pointing towards my free end, because I'm chopping kind of through the bits that isn't the root, if you like. The root is always going to hold the onion together. So I'm just going to hold my fingers on the top of the onion and very gently, if you want to use a smaller knife, that's fine. Try and, sorry, I should go from the top. Go through the top and just try and put the nose of your knife down in from the top of your onion, okay, and see if you can get about 4 or 5 slits. You don't need to worry about your onion being really finely diced today. I just want you to kind of get a feeling for chopping this onion. Okay, that's going down through the top of the onion. My root is still there intact, holding things together. And then if you can, I'm just going to bring my board towards me. It's just that the camera, I'm trying to keep it on camera. And I'm just going to gently, as I started, but I didn't finish earlier on, just trying to go through the body of the onion there as well. Okay, if at any stage you feel that this isn't comfortable, just try and do your normal chopping way you chop an onion tonight. I just want to make you think about this, and maybe it's a good chance for you to go into the on-demand course and actually do it yourselves. So once I've got my cuts across the onion and over the top of the onion, when I chop it now, it's going to form nice uniform cubes of onion, okay? So again, my technique, just like with the leek, is the nose of the knife is on the board, okay, so that saves things slipping and my hands being in the wrong position. Now look at your hand. I do not want any of you to rush this and have your fingers, so as soon as you get into position and come down, your fingers are kind of holding the onion. If you see, it's like a little claw I have. I'm just kind of using my fingers, and some of you will find this awkward, using my fingers to stabilize the onion on the board nice and firmly, okay? If anything's slipping, stop. And anyway, as soon as you start to chop, I want you to just check and freeze and check where is your thumb and where is your little finger. When I raise my knife, I have my knuckles of my fingers literally pushing on the knife. The knife blade never comes over those knuckles, okay? This is what I want you to think about. Otherwise, the knife would come up and slice the front of my knuckles, but my knuckles at least are forward of my thumb and my little finger. So when you get a little bit closer or halfway through the onion, you won't have the speed, you won't have the technique. Just stop and just do any old way chopping your onion. But you can see what I have here. That's how you get those nice uniform bits of onion, okay? So I just happen to be able to just go a little bit quicker, okay? And I'll do it once more. Then I'll play a tune, and if you want to give it a go yourself, take your time. We'll stop, there's no rush. I want to make sure that you don't cut yourselves. So there's no need at all. So I'm just going to move my onion into a little bowl beside me, so it's kind of out of the way, and keep your board nice and stable. Remember what I said about the board. Put a little bit of a damp cloth underneath it. And here we go. So the other onion again. So this time I'm actually going to go through the body. I think it's just probably a little bit easier. Even just go through once if you can, but never force it and never have your hands in the line of the knife in case it slipped. So I've gone through the body of my onion. Remember, the root is facing my free hand. Then I'm going to go down with the tip of my knife. That's much easier. You get the tip piercing from the top, and my fingers are never underneath. They're always kind of above the knife here. Just 3 would be fine, because we don't need very fine dice today, as I said. And then I'm going to slice. I've done my cross cuts and my high top cuts, and now I'm going to go down with the nose of the knife on the board and down with a kind of a sawing, a levering action, like I suppose like a lever, kind of just kind of moving on the board. Okay, and you can see that the knife isn't coming up higher than my fingers, and then I just finish it off. So even if you have to throw away that little bit of the end of the onion that I was talking about that's keeping everything together, even if you can't chop that and you discard that, I would rather you discard that and protect your fingers than try and get every single tiny little last slice of onion out and hurt yourself. Okay, so that's our onion chopped. So let me put on the music. If anyone has any questions, this is a good time. You can either unmute or pop them in the chat. And then after we've got our onion and our leek chopped and everyone's happy, I can just have a few little herbs. I can just kind of pull those thyme leaves directly off the stalk. That's my stalk of thyme there. So I'm just literally pulling those, because it's a hard woody herb and it's just coming off if I just kind of squeeze my fingers down there. Otherwise, some of you might be just putting a little pinch from a jar of dried herbs. So I'll be popping that in with my leeks and my onions when we chop them. So let's just play a tune, and any chat, you can put it in the chat now. So you can have another song and then give me a thumbs up when you've done your onion.
Battery 90%. Connected to Finesse 111.
Niente più ti lega a questi luoghi e anche questi fiori azzurri. Neanche questo tempo grigio, pieno di musica e di uomini che ti sono piaciuti. It's wonderful, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. Good luck, my baby, it's wonderful, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. I dream of you. Chips, chips. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Via, via, vieni via con me. Entra in questo amore buio, non perderti per niente al mondo. Via, via, non perderti per niente al mondo. Lo spettacolo d'arte varia di uno innamorato di te. It's wonderful, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. Good luck, my baby, that's wonderful, that's wonderful, it's wonderful. I dream of you.
Thanks, Derbliss. Let me know when you've got your onion done.
Entra e fatti un bagno caldo. C'è un accappatoio azzurro. Fuori piove un mondo freddo.
Alana, Liam, Ava, well done. Okay, so take your time, guys. Paul's ready? So remember, it's all about just keeping the root intact when you slice initially.
Due note al ritornello raggiano la pelle di quei due, il corpo di lei mandava lampate africane, lui sembrava un coccodrillo. I sax spingevano come ciclisti gregari.
So when you've done your onion, let's get our, because we've got our leeks and our onions here, and I've just got all my little bits of thyme leaves out into a little bowl, and I know I've weighed up my butter, and I have my stock made. Let's take out our chicken, and we can start prepping our chicken as well. But this is when it's really important to have another dinner plate, so that when you chop your chicken, it can go in the dishwasher. Has anyone joined us that needs to catch up a little bit? Send me something private in the chat if you want to, so I know where you're at, if you have any questions.
Qualcuno nei paraggi cominciava a sternutire. Il ventilatore ronzava in mezzo.
Anyone joined us late? Still catching up?
Sax ipnotizzati dai movimenti di lei.
Not seeing anything.
Un rumore di gomma.
Okay, so I saw a few thumbs up. Another thumbs up and we can start doing our chicken. Okay, yeah. Max and Alex, Donald, perfect. Okay, and Ava, yeah. Okay, and Paul. Okay, well let's go with this. So the next thing, oops, have to.
Andava elegante. L'orchestra era partita, decollava.
Okay, so now we're going to just prepare our chicken, and after that, just be thinking ahead that you'll have your pot ready. So if you want to see the pot, I'll be using as that. But this is just to cook the onions and the leeks and the chicken, and then I'll be transferring it into what we would call an oven-proof dish or a lasagna dish. So you can then, even if it's a bit messy in the pot, you can transfer it into that. We'll cover it with our pastry, which should be defrosted, but which should be in the fridge at the moment. And then we'll be placing it in the oven. The reason I could, if I had done this like earlier on, I could do all my chicken in the pan and have the creamy, lovely sauce for the pie in the pot. And if it was cold, it would be very easy for me to, nowadays the pastry that you buy in the shop does tend to fit in these kind of larger size pots. But the problem is, if you try and carry the puff pastry onto a hot filling, it's just going to start to kind of melt. No, not melt exactly, but it will kind of melt. It's like puff pastry would have a lot of butter in it. The commercial ones wouldn't be more butter, but it will just get soft and kind of flabby or whatever, and you won't be able to work with it. So we are tonight going to be just frying off our chicken and our leeks and stuff in a decent heavy base wide pot if possible, or you'll have to use a decent size like your pasta pot, but we'll transfer it to the oven and we'll use our lasagna dish. So most of you will have a lasagna dish somewhere in the house. Again, your helper can get you can assist you with that. Okay, so for the chicken, remember we have our board with a little bit of cloth underneath it, and we just want chunks of chicken, and we want to have a plate beside us so that the chicken goes directly on the dinner plate. And then that means that, we're not kind of cross-contaminating too much stuff. When you're chopping your chicken, you just want to just quickly just check, are there any little bits of sinew here? Now this would be a little bit more important. This would be a little bit more important if you were doing like big fillets of chicken, but because you're chopping it up, you're going to get a chance to see, if you've got a bit of like stray bone in there, or a little bit of the sinewy bits here at the joints. The reason is the sinewy bits will kind of be like these muscles that will just contract up when you have when you kind of cook like a piece of chicken breast. But for our purposes tonight, we're just going to get chunks of chicken. I'll look at that chat now in a second. I just didn't catch it. It came flashed up on the screen very quickly there. Okay, so you'll see me here on there is 2 cameras. Anyone who joined late, if you want to pin that there is a second camera that you can watch, and this shows me just doing the chicken here like I did the onion. So we're just going to do cubes of chicken. I would say like a big decent sized I'm trying to think of a square that's I've gone totally blank here. A big chunk, a bite-sized piece of chicken. So you know, it doesn't matter if they're very small. The only problem is if they're a bit small, they can just kind of catch on the pan when you're frying them off. But just even-sized chunks of chicken. This isn't a dish tonight that's going to be I'm going to just chop this and then I'll answer that question because my hands have chicken all over them. So any of you guys tonight, just make sure that you're not kind of answering the phone when it goes and stuff. If you've kind of got your chicken, make sure that you have your hands that in the sudsy water there when you have touched the chicken, and then you'll be fine. So I'm just going under the chicken, just making sure I turn it over and remove any of those white fatty bits. They're of no use nutritionally to us. And just picking over it. Sometimes some shops will sell chicken and the butchery is very good in it, and you have no little bits of shell of bone, and then other ones, it's surprising, you can actually get quite big chunks of bone. So I'd always be very careful to pick through it, just like I would with if I had crab or something. So just really, some of you may have bought it already pre-chopped and you're one step ahead of me, cheating already, which is great. Thinking ahead. Okay, whatever makes life easier for you guys is fine. So I'm going to be teaching you so many different proper cooking techniques. There's lots of recipes on the internet that I'm sure you see, and you know, they're like 3-ingredient chicken pies, and you know, it probably is possible. But at the end of the day, all the recipes I'm doing will all have a different technique that I'm trying to teach you. Like tonight, if you think of it, it's like making a white sauce, but we're not quite making a white sauce. Making a white sauce, you might have heard, is kind of quite difficult. It's making a bechamel sauce. It's the basis of like a mac and cheese and stuff. But actually, there's elements of what we're going to do tonight, which is making a roux with your butter and your flour, and then lifting it up with your stock. But instead of stock, you could be adding stock and a bit of milk, or stock and a bit more cream, or something like that. So essentially, you're making a lovely creamy sauce, and we may not even need the cream tonight. When you see your sauce, you're going to realize that it's actually lovely and creamy anyway. If you want to add the extra luxury, you add in the cream tonight. But if you haven't opened the cream and you want to save it for tomorrow for a dessert that you're making, you don't need to use the cream. So we'll see when we're making it. So my chicken there has been done. I'm going to read the chat now once I've washed my hands and I can answer a question. But as you can see, my chicken is just chopped up. It's on a dinner plate now, so there's no cross-contamination. All of my chopping board now has had chicken on it, and my knife in my hands. I go straight to the dishwasher or the wash up and just make sure it goes in. And never put your knife in the wash up. Always leave your knife to the side of the sink. So that's a very important thing that we ran a cookery school for 15 years in Dublin City Centre, and the first thing we would say to everyone is never ever, when you're washing up, there's things, some of you did my pizza class recently and I said to you, never throw or wash your flour covered hands in a sink, because it actually starts to harden up like cement in the drains. But another one that we used to say is never actually submerge a knife in a sink either, because you might be busy in the kitchen here, your mom or your dad, your little brother or someone else might just go to wash something and they want to do some washing to help you, and they might put their hand directly into that big knife that you use to chop your onions, your leeks and your chicken, and they get a really nasty cut. So always, 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 wherever you are, never submerge a knife, especially chopping knife like that, in a sink. Always just put it on the side. Everyone understands you're just doing it for safety, so you're not being lazy, that you're not washing up or anything. So there's my chicken, there's my onions, there's my leeks. We're going to use these now to fry off in our pan, and we're going to have some oil to hand initially to fry up our chicken, and then when we are going to make our sauce for the chicken in the same pan, we're going to start adding in the butter and the flour, and then we'll lift it up with our stock that we've made. I'm just going to go over and read that chat and answer the question. Yeah, a frying pan's fine. Okay, so if you have a nice frying pan, because we're transferring the chicken mixture into the oven-proof dish, that's fine. The reason I wouldn't use a frying pan for everything, like a big stir-fry, curry pan, is because we are cooking this pastry in the oven, and if your pan doesn't have an oven-proof handle, that's where you're gonna get stuck. Okay, so let's get our frying done. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make our pie filling. It's very, very quick. We're going to put our hob on, get a clean pan. To save yourself adding too much oil to your pan, the trick here is to hold your hand over the pan, and when you feel that the hand is starting to get a little bit uncomfortable, that's when you can remove it and you know that you can add the oil. Oil, when you add it to a pan, is going to expand. Okay, so invariably, I'm sure you've all done this, you add a bit of oil to your pan and next thing you've got too much oil in there, and then you're pouring it out, keeping it in a teacup and trying to use it over the next few days. So the best thing to do is look at your recipe. If it says 1 to 2 tablespoons, start with your 1 tablespoon, and then if you need a bit more because the leeks or the onions or whatever are catching, add a little bit more oil. Don't be scrimping on that kind of stuff. Remember, we're not using the butter yet, we're using the oil initially to fry off our onions and our leeks, and I just want to check if we're adding the chicken first or after. Okay, so actually what we're going to do is we're going to add the chicken first, okay? The reason being it's just going to have a little bit more space for your chicken to kind of cook in the oil, seal on the outside, so that we know that we've sealed our chicken, and then the chicken will continue cooking when we add our leeks and our onions, and then it's going to cook again when it's in the oven. So tonight we're not worried about undercooked chicken. Now I'm checking my pan. Remember I said if your pan is slightly warm, you don't touch the pan, but you hold your hand over it, and when you can feel the heat radiating up, that your hand can feel hot, you know it's ready to add the oil. So we add about a tablespoon of oil there, just swirl it around, and now we're going to add our chicken to the pan. It's good if you have a tongs here. You'll need maybe a wooden spoon or a heat-proof spatula. But another thing I like to use is a tongs. Okay, so I'm going to just, don't drop all the chicken in at once. You can hear a little bit of a sear. You can cook the chicken, but don't move it. If you try and move it initially, it'll start to tear. Rather than moving it, just turn down your heat and let the chicken sit there for a minute or two. And when it's ready, it's going to start allowing you move it around and turn it, and then you will start to get opaque on all this outside. So my chicken is in the pan. At this stage, because we have a minute, if you want to get some salt, if you didn't add all that chicken stock cube, you might want to just throw a bit of salt on your chicken now, or we can wait till we add it. I'll add it when I add in my onions. So initially my chicken went in, it was sizzling a little bit. I don't want to burn my chicken, I don't really want to develop a really dark golden crust, but I do want it to kind of get that little bit of, just to seal it on the outside. So now I'm going to check, can I move it around? And I can. So I'm just going to move it around to happy. If when you move it, it starts to stick, just give it another minute. It's just not ready to kind of be moved, or add a little bit of oil. So now we're moving our chicken around the pan because we want to turn it. So don't worry too much about, for there are OCD perfectionists, we don't want to like every single side be white and then turn every single one and then the other side is all, because by the time you do that, some of them will be burnt. So just manage your heat. I went down on the heat because initially it was kind of like sizzling a bit, and now it needs to go up again on my heat. So as long as you're not like at the top heat, so if we have like a gas hob, and you have like 1 to 5 as your temperature controls, you probably started off with 4, you went down to 2, then you're back up to 3. That's kind of how it works. Okay, as long as your oil isn't smoking. So what we're doing here is we're just sealing our chicken. If I was doing a very quick curry, I would have to make sure that my chicken was much more cooked through than this. Here I'm just kind of getting the white opaque color on the outside of the chicken. Again, my temperature now, it started at 4, it went down to 2, it's back up at 3, because I want to keep getting this little bit of a seal on it. Now, it's not fully opaque on all sides, but I know that I'm going to start adding in my leeks and my onion in a minute, so I'm just kind of making sure when it starts to nearly be cooked on the outside. I'll add in my onion. And nothing in the chat at the moment, everyone okay? So remember, next week we'll be doing dessert. I normally start with a dessert. It'll probably be brownies. I can't remember exactly if it's brownies, but it's always a delicious dessert. And don't worry, it's all doable, but what I would recommend you do next week is weigh out your ingredients, because it'll absolutely make all the difference. And by week 4, I will definitely be weighing out the ingredients myself, so there won't be any excuses. Okay, so now our chicken is pretty much looking nice and opaque on all of the outside. Okay, so now our chicken, so you can see I've just lightened everything up there. Okay, so now we're at the stage where I would add a little bit more oil, because I'm going to add in my onions and my leeks. So we've already chopped up our onions and our leeks. So let's just create a little bit of space here in our pan in the middle to add that second bit of oil. Remember we said there was 1 to 2 tablespoons. Well, I'm adding in that little bit of oil just because I want to make sure that when I add in my onions and my leeks, we can get them in the pan. And remember I said my leek was very big. Most of you will have a leek that's a lot smaller. So I'm not worried. I probably could get it all in, and in fact I probably will, because at this stage we love this chicken pie, and no one says that they don't like leeks anymore. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to start to feel things will stick initially, and then they'll start to, you know, the onions and the leeks will start to release a little bit of moisture, so we'll be fine then. At the moment we're just kind of making sure that things don't catch on the pan. And also what I want to do, so if you feel that your pan, mine's back up at 5, I'm going to turn it back down to 4 or 3. Now at this stage, to help, and I'll say this a few times in the course, at this stage it's a good idea to use a little bit of salt to help break down the walls of your onions, and just so that they can start to just cook, and then that the moisture in them evaporates off, and then they can kind of get a bit more sweet as well. So we're just getting a little bit of salt here, just a little pinch of salt. Never add the salt directly to the top of the pan. Just add it in there from your fingers, a pinch of salt. And the center of my pan is just catching a little bit, and that's why I reduced my heat. And that's why earlier on someone asked did we have to use the wine in the recipe. So that would be the case of if you had the wine and you had a little bit of a kind of caramelization on your pan, that's where you deglaze the pan. You just throw a little bit of the wine at the end in, and that'll lift all that little kind of sediment, caramelized sediment, off the base of the pan. So can you see the way everything is reducing down here? We'll just give it a little bit more time. So what we're going to be thinking of doing next is the next step, and what we want to have in preparation is our spoon. So we can, well, first I'll answer that now. We're going to add in our butter in a minute, and then our flour and our stock. So remember, if you haven't made your stock already, get your stock ready. And I hope you have your oven on as well. Yes, so someone is saying, have I added the onion? Yes. First of all, we used our oil to fry off our chicken. I used about a tablespoon of oil. I fried off my chicken. Then when my chicken was opaque and I was turning it and it wasn't kind of sticking to the pan, it wasn't fully cooked through, but it was white on the outside, I added in my leeks, and then I also added in my onions at the same time. So you can just do your leeks and your onions at the same time. That's probably why you didn't notice, because they're both the same color. And you can see now where initially the pan was very crowded, and now things are just moving around nicely. Again, watch your heat. Initially it was kind of starting to catch on the pan. Now the onions and the leeks are releasing a little bit of moisture, so I'm able to stir things a little bit easier. And at this stage I also added a little bit of salt just to help the cooking process, and I'm going to throw in my thyme as well. So if you have your herbs, add them in now, and stirring around. So now we're going to get ready for the next step in the recipe, will be to add our butter. So remember earlier on we weighed out about 30 grams of butter. Now again, managing my heat, I do want to make sure, I'd like to see my leeks just reduce down a little bit more. Just like in a recipe, when you see a recipe that says sweat your onions. similar to leeks. You're just sweating them until they kind of start to go a little bit translucent. They're sweetening up by doing that as well. And you just don't want them to be kind of like eating raw leeks. So when you feel that you're looking at the leeks and they're a little bit more kind of translucent, and just a little bit softer. So what you should do here is because we're getting a little bit of moisture in the pan as well, you can then increase your heat up again a little bit more. So I'm back up at 5 and actually going up to 6 here now. So I'm really getting to the stage where I'm getting more confident, allowing the heat to go through everything. That means that the chicken is continuing to cook, because at one stage my heat was too low and my chicken was just staying pink, and so I didn't want that. Okay, now that I feel that everything's loosening down, we're going to go to the next step. Now this step, you're going to make sure that your pan is down again around 2 or 3. So this is a very important cooking technique. It's making a roux. And take your pot off the heat while you're listening to me, it's just kind of you're waiting for the next step. Take your pot off the heat just so the things don't burn. So this is making a roux, and the first thing to make a roux, and it's the basis of a bechamel sauce, or else what we would call a white sauce, is adding your butter and your flour. So remember I said that we weighed out our butter. We're going to put the butter in the center of the pot. Again, if you're not ready with the flour, take the pot off. But then remember what we said, we need 30 grams of flour, and we know that a tablespoon is 15 grams. So all I'm going to do is, as that butter is melting, I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of flour, because that's approximately 30 grams. 15 is a tablespoon. Now we can always add a little bit more. We want to just stir the flour into the center. Sorry, the butter is in the center of the pan, I should have said. If you already put the butter in and it's everywhere, that's okay, just move the flour everywhere as well. But what I'm doing is making this little paste in the center of my pot. Remember, turn down your heat. Mine keeps jumping up for some reason. So I'm just rubbing the butter and the flour in the center of the pan. The reason I'm doing this is to cook out the flour taste from the roux. Okay, so this cooks out the flour. And this is what you would do if you're making a white sauce, so that you can make mac and cheese or a cauliflower cheese sauce. This is one of the first things I learned when I was about 12, and I used to make the cauliflower cheese sauce when I was a kid. So this is a great skill, and it's in so many recipes, and especially so many delicious, comforting home food recipes. Okay, so once you've cooked out your flour and butter mixture, and you've got a bit of a paste, if you wanted to add a little bit more, the paste would get a lot more stronger, like putty, so it might just be a bit cause some lumps. So we're going to keep it as a kind of a nice thick paste, and now we're going to start to add in our next ingredient. And at this stage, if you hadn't added a bit of salt already, don't forget to add your salt, because we do want to kind of keep the flavour in here. Salt, pepper, you could even add in mustard. Again, I like to keep our recipes for the transition year cooking very simple, so I try and take out ingredients if I can. That's why I might say this would be lovely with some Dijon mustard in here, but again, I don't want you running around the shops looking for Dijon mustard, because it's not essential for you learning how to cook this delicious dish. Okay, the next ingredient going in after we've made our roux, is everyone following? Ask the questions, no problem if you want to unmute. We had in our pan, we had our oil, we fried off our chicken in the oil, then we added in our leeks and our onions. We got the leeks and the onions to soften down. We might have added a little sprinkle of salt in there. And then what we did was we just looked at everything. We said, well, our chicken has been cooking there. It's opaque on the outside. It's pretty much, we've increased our heat and we let the chicken cook through. And now what we're doing is we're starting the basis of our salt. So you just make a little well in the center of the chicken and leek and onion mixture. You add your 30 grams of butter. And then you actually add in 2 tablespoons of flour, and you mix the butter and flour together to form a nice paste. You let it you stir it for another minute just to cook out the raw taste of the flour, and then you're going to start now adding your stock. So we have our 300 mils of stock. It doesn't matter that it's still, it was made about half an hour ago and it's still a bit colder, because now this is what you want to do, is raise your temperature if it was a bit cold, because it's going to heat the stock as it goes in. And now we're going to stir everything around. If you were one of the people, maybe I said I may not have made it clear enough to put the butter and the flour in the center of your pot, you might have just added the butter and stirred things and then stirred the flour around. That's fine as well. You shouldn't have any lumps. at this stage, but by stirring in, you just might notice that when you stir in the stock, you do have to stir, and what you're going to find is as you stir the stock, you're going to see this lovely creaminess develop in your sauce. And I'm so used to making this for the TYs and for my family that I often don't even bother buying the cream for the recipe. But I think tonight what you might like to do is, if you bought the cream, why not add a tablespoon or two in there? If you don't want to use cream, you could add a little bit of milk, just to give it a little bit more added luxury, just in case you're making it and you feel to your taste that, you know, by only using stock like I might decide to do, you might find that it's not as creamy as you would like it to be. Any questions? So you can see, as I increase my heat, now that the stock is going in, that's where I would have kind of deglazed the pan with the wine before I added in the kind of the butter and the flour. But we didn't need the wine. The wine is just adding that extra little bit of luxury as well. Just like the Dijon mustard, all layering up flavors in your dishes, and this is what you're going to become confident doing. Some of you will be doing it naturally, you just know, because your mom or your dad already makes this, or your granny makes it, and you just know it needs something, it needs a kick, and you've got that palate already developed. Okay, so I haven't added all the stock, I'm adding it in bits and pieces. So I'm adding about half a cup as I go. And keeping my heat high, otherwise my heat has gone down again. So if you keep your heat high, it just means that your sauce will thicken up, because what's happening is the liquid being added to the flour is enabling the flour to kind of thicken your sauce. You might have heard that people add corn flour to thicken a sauce, but some people can't tolerate corn flour, so just normal flour. I wouldn't be kind of substituting corn flour for white sauce. When I'm making a white sauce, I would usually just do it with the plain flour. But it's good to know that a little bit of corn flour, if you're making a stew or a casserole or something and you want to just thicken it up, corn flour would be your answer instead. Now I've got a kind of nearly a rolling boil. I'll add the rest of the stock in. And this is the basis of my chicken pie. And after this, now we're going to, we have our oven on. So we're going to put the pie in the oven. So I'm just going to let this bubble away here. The more it bubbles, the more it's going to thicken my sauce, okay? And then I'm going to get ready with my puff pastry. And we're going to be able to place the puff pastry over the top of the pie and transfer it into the dish first. Okay, so at this stage, I just want to make sure that I'm getting a nice simmer on my chicken pie. Now this pie is going to bake in the oven for about 25 minutes would be a good kind of time for you to just plan that the dinner will be on the table. And if you haven't got some wedges or something in the oven now, or salad or garlic bread or something, if you are trying to feed a good amount of people, for some people they'll be fine with just a salad and the pie. But then if you're trying to stretch this a little bit further, you might just want to throw something else in the oven as well, just tonight, or a little bit of rice on or something, especially if you have a helper. So at this stage, taste your sauce. I've got my sauce here bubbling away. I wanted to take out my dish because the next step is going to be to transfer the chicken pie filling into this dish, and I'm going to pull out my puff pastry. So here's the puff pastry, and just make sure you don't kind of open it up and put it on a hot surface anywhere. If you are. So we have our puff pastry. It kind of unrolls nicely if it's been in the fridge. It's not cracking or doing anything like that. So I'm just going to taste my chicken pie, and then we're going to place the lid over it. But I have a little trick to do first, and that's going to be to score the pastry and glaze it with some egg. So the pie is gorgeous. I'm going to take it off the heat here, and I'm going to transfer it carefully into my pot, into my oven-proof dish. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And you can serve this dinner with any extra green veg that you want. Put that there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just be careful when you do this, but I'm just going to pour this hot pie filling directly. If you want to watch, you'll kind of understand it. You might be able to spoon it in, but I'm just going to pour it very gently You'd probably be better spooning it. It's just that I'm kind of trying to do this ahead of you. And we'll just get any of the chicken. Now I have a good bit here in the pot. So if you feel it's kind of overflowing a bit, you could take some of the sauce out. Probably because I had quite a big leak and I may have even added a little bit of extra chicken. So I'm assuming that if you followed the recipe and you just did 3 chicken breasts, you're probably going to have the perfect amount in your oven-proof dish. But again, next time, just pay attention so that next time you make this, you'll know, do you need a bigger dish or anything like that. Okay, so now the dish is filled with the chicken and leek pie mixture. We're going to do our topping. So this is really the magic of this recipe. So we have, I just want to make sure I don't put my pastry on anything too hot or warm. I have my pastry. Now before I do finish this, I wanted to give you a little tip. If your pastry is a lot bigger than the pie dish needs, see the way it kind of, the length of the pastry is a lot more than I need, okay, for my pie dish. You can see here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of guesstimate how much I need, leaving about a good inch at least around the edges, because we want to tuck in our pie. You know the way you have a nice pie top and it kind of like is ballooning up around the place. You don't want the edges exactly sitting flush to the walls of the pie dish, because what happens is the liquid will start to bubble up in the oven and then it'll start to kind of seep over the top of the pie and you'll get the Titanic sinking down. Your pie crust will sink deep down into your pie filling, and this is what I always call the Titanic effect. So we're hoping that we won't get any Titanics. And remember guys, do take your pictures as well. So I'm just reminding you all these things before we finish tonight. So I'm cutting away some of the pastry, but what you're going to do is the stuff that you've cut away, you don't need to waste this, because what you can do is just cut it into little, what I call my puff pastry kind of pillows or triangles. Okay, and I'm going to, when I baste the top of the pie, I also have these extra little pieces, I'm going to baste them as well. Okay, I'll just kind of keep just to keep things nice and tidy, I'll place them on that paper that it came in the shop, just so that I'm not making a mess everywhere. Okay, now this is the magic here. So we're going to use our egg, and I have a pastry brush, but you can do this without a pastry brush. And we're going to just put our egg into one of our little ramekins would be fine, or a glass if you didn't have anything else. So I'm just going to crack an egg into a glass or a cup or something like that. I'm going to use one of the forks I used earlier on to just kind of whisk the egg. The egg is going to give our pastry a lovely golden professional finish, okay? So we're going to glaze the top of the pastry and place it on top of our pie. So if you place the pastry on the pie now, as I said, the heat of the pie filling is just going to cause the pastry to be unmanageable. So we want to do a little bit of fancy work on our pastry before we put it in the oven. So hopefully if you pay attention, you can see what I'm going to do. We're going to score our pastry. Okay, so I've got a rectangle of pastry in front of me here. Before I put the egg wash on, which I have here, just a broken up egg in a dish here or a glass, I'm going to score it. So if you think of your pastry, place the long end of the rectangle just in front of you, your tummy there. Okay, and we're going to score going from the left, well, whatever, I'm left-handed, but I'm going from the left. Going from a triangle and getting a little tip of a small knife and just gently scoring a diagonal across, okay? So if we can do this tonight, this is going to be lovely. It also just stops the pie kind of sometimes ballooning too much. It kind of breaks up the pie is puff pastry. It's like sausage roll pastry. It's just going to go and balloon up in the lovely hot oven. So I'm just scoring, but I'm only letting the tip of the knife score the pastry. I do not want the tip of the knife to break through and cut the pastry in any way. So even if you wanted to play safe and use a dinner knife, I just happen to like using this nice thin tipped small fruit knife. So the big thing is just to use the weight of the knife is what's cutting scoring the pastry very gently. And then I've done one direction. This is just like scoring the ham at Christmas. Now I'm going the opposite direction so I get a crosshatch effect. I also just want to check that our oven temperature is good. So our oven temperature, yeah, I said 180. I would put that up to 190 if you have, yeah, if you've got a preheated oven to 180 now, I'd put that up to 190 now, because what you really want is, because we want this to cook in 25 minutes, the chicken essentially is already cooked you want that nice heat of the oven. So 190 degrees centigrade is what's going to make your pastry rise really fast and be perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now I score down one side. I'm going to go on the opposite side, or you could start on the same side you started with, go down the bit low nearest to your tummy, and just go the opposite direction. So now you're seeing that you're creating these crosshatch effects in your pastry just with the tip of the knife. It's not going through the pastry. We're just using the tip of the knife to score this pastry, and then we're going to get ready now to use our egg wash. And then after we've washed it with the egg wash, we lift it up off the paper and we lift it onto our pie, and then we're going to tuck it in. And as I said, when I tuck it in, I want you to not tucking someone into the bed with the duvet and under them. I want you to tuck it in, press down, and then the edges of your duvet, for instance, will go up the walls of the pie dish inside, so that it's like creating a block, because that stops the liquid from the pie. If it is a little bit high in the pie dish, it stops it seeping in on top of your pastry, and you get the Titanic submerged. Okay, so now we have our pastry brushed, and I have my triangles here as well, they'll be brushed with pastry too. So what we're going to do is just get our egg wash, and we're going to wash it over, and you can do this with your fingers if you don't have the pastry brush, of course. Most people wouldn't have a pastry brush, and I'm sure half of you wouldn't be able to find it even if you did. There's no point in screaming around the house. It's not essential. You can just use your fingers. As long as your hands are clean, you can do these little jobs. Okay, so we're just washing with the pastry over the pastry with the egg wash. We call it egg wash. This is just an egg. If you were stuck and didn't have an egg, you could use a little bit of milk. But the egg really gives it that lovely golden color. And I mustn't forget my pillows as well. So they're going to go on a baking tray, and they're just going to balloon up. Now the puff pastry pillows will only take 10 minutes. Whereas your pie is going to need the 25 minutes. So don't put the puff pastry, little extras in until just after 15 minutes of cooking the pie, okay? Or else put them in now, but make sure you set your timer. So there are my puff pastry pillows, they'll go in after. Are we all ready now to lift up the pastry? This might be a little bit messy, but don't worry, it's just one of those things. It's the last thing you have to do. You pull paper away from your pastry, and you have your pie in position. And then you lay your pastry over the pie. Remember, if you want to watch this now, so we have cut the pastry a little bit, about 1 inch to 2 inches further around than we needed. And then we place it on top of the pie, and at this stage we'll feel the heat, and then we push in our pastry so it's going inside the pie dish. It's okay if the edges of it are like a dress frill kind of going up higher. But we want to create a little bit of a barrier, so we don't want any of the liquid kind of able to come in and go in over the top of the pastry. So we're going to pressing this pastry in, tucking it in. Okay, sometimes it overlaps and it's fine. It's just the liquid in the pastry or in the pie dish that we don't want seeping out. All lovely and risen. It'll probably be less risen in the center, so just try and watch it in the center, and as soon as the center's risen as well, it's ready to go. What else did I want to say about that? Yes, don't let it burn. So if it's starting to go dark golden and it's still not 25 minutes, take it out at 20 minutes if it's risen and it's golden. I don't want you to burn the puff pastry, especially like burnt butter. The taste of burnt butter isn't good, so that's what you don't want to do. So that's going in with our lovely crosshatch effect. That's hard to see, but you'll notice it when you take it out of the oven.